Good afternoon, Cal. Did you hear that Mr. Carney was in Calgary and met with dozen selected oil executives to discuss making Canada an energy powerhouse?
Makes sense to me. It's been a no-brainer for years.
Yeah, I think I ran for mayor on the premise that maybe we should start being proactive in the oil industry here out west.
Well, you got some problems, and that's the fact that Alberta has the oil, Saskatchewan has the oil, Newfoundland has the oil. Everybody in between wants it, but nobody wants it to cross their province.
Yeah, that's been a big problem, especially with Quebec and pipelines to get the oil out to the refineries in the east. There's some skullduggery, I think we can call it, between Irving Oil and the government as protectionists to the refineries. I'm not sure what really is going on out east, why they wouldn't want Alberta oil. They love Alberta jobs, but they don't want our oil.
I think it's worse than that. They love Alberta transfer payments, but they think of Alberta's oil as being dirty. So
Uh,
they allow the Canadian government to launder the money and clean it up, get the dirt off of it, and give it to Quebec.
there really isn't a transfer payment. It's nothing goes from Alberta to Quebec. It's more of a federal taxes paid to the federal government, and proportionately Harper set the agenda on how the distribution of the money is to prop up other areas of the country that aren't as economically doing as well.
So you're blaming this on Harper.
Well,
Don't
he's the
forget.
one set up the transfer payment
Oh,
agreement between the provinces.
and Trudeau hasn't been in power for 14 years and could have changed at any time, right? And as far as not money not going directly from Alberta to Quebec, I just have to ask one question: do you believe in magic? Do
Quebec
you think
has
that
more population than Alberta.
no, but do you think Alberta's money magically disappears and just shows up in the wallets of the Quebec
No, but
government?
it is a country where we have to help the less fortunate areas. Money doesn't just go to Quebec, it goes to the Maritimes, it goes to different provinces at different times. The formula was well worked out, and it seems to be a fairly good formula, except for Alberta propagandizes that it's coming right out of the pockets of Alberta and heading to Quebec, which is throwing fuel on a fire that really isn't accurate. And I mean, if you use accurate terms, I got no problem with it. But when you're gaslighting the situation for
Okay, let's
political benefit,
let's look at the way they determine the gross domestic product of the province in order to say who is a have and who is not a have not province. They do not include Quebec's power generation as part of their gross domestic product when calculating whether it's a have or have not province. If they did so, Quebec would be a have province. So the scale, somebody has their foot on the scale. And whether you call it a direct subsidy or not, the fact of the matter is Alberta pays more into the federal government and Quebec takes out about equally the same amount. So, like it or not, Canada's a petrodollar. The value of our dollar depends directly on the price of oil and gas. We get two-thirds of the world price from our only client, which causes nothing but economic hardship, in my opinion, on a diminishing resource.
I
That's one
agree.
issue. That's one issue that Carney has to deal with. The transfer
The
payments.
issue, though, going back to the issue of Quebec, it's gaslighting if you're not dealing with the real problem. Like you stated, if they included the hydro power in Quebec's income generation, it may not qualify for those subsidies. But that's not the issue that they're claiming. They're saying the transfer payments. Well, if you have a calculation problem, that's easy to deal with at government level. So let the people know that maybe they need to do a recalculation of this on what constitutes the product or the gross national product of a province to qualify. But
But that's
that's
been known.
not what they're
That
telling in the press. They're saying it's straight from Alberta government. They're fueling a separatist movement in
well,
Alberta
well,
by
hang. No,
lying.
No, but hang on a minute. The money gets generated on the oil and gas in Alberta, it goes to the federal government, and the federal government hands it over to the have-not provinces, of which Quebec is one of them. And Quebec receives roughly the same amount as Alberta doesn't get. So it's easy to see a direct correlation where one hand is paying the other hand, and it's not gaslighting, and
Well,
it's
it
been
is,
that way.
because the Alberta government, instead of being a good partner in the Canada Confederation, Alberta is giving all the differentiation in pricing to align with the US. They're giving all the money and profits to the US. So like when Ed Stelmach tried to say, hey, we should get the same price for our royalty as Alaska, the US used their influence in the media and got rid of him as the leader of Alberta. And that is, Alberta's more than willing to subsidize trillions of dollars to the US since 1979, but they don't want to, they whine and complain, and it's all Ottawa's fault that they're giving away their oil for below market price. That's bullshit. It's the Alberta government here that has been, sorry, can't use that word. It is the Alberta government here that's making it tough on Albertans, because we should be a very well off province. And when you're giving away, tens of millions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars annually in subsidies to an oil industry that's filthy rich, you've got a real problem going on. And they're gaslighting it, trying to blame Ottawa and the East. That's not the problem. The problem is homegrown right here in Alberta. It has been decades and decades of control by one party and one group of people that are making sure that we get screwed over as Albertans on what we're receiving for our oil and gas leaving the province. And Ottawa has stepped in numerous times to help out. I mean, look, even Smith won't announce to people that $29 billion was given by the federal government to subsidize the oil industry in Alberta just recently. That's my point, is that this transfer payment crap is gaslighting it. When you're transferring, trillions of dollars to the US, that's more of a concern than building a stronger Canada.
There's a lot of issues, and the unfortunate bit is the easy issue is the transfer payments. The other issue, obviously, is pipeline capacity and only having one client. The U.S. buys the majority of Canadian, if not all, Canadian exports in oil and gas. And
Well,
the
the reason
difficult,
that is they own 95% of the oil the minute it's coming out of the ground. So they get to determine where they're going to send it.
well, you can't blame everybody without blaming the root causes. And the root causes are that there's a huge backlash against pipelines. And pipelines are the safest way to transport oil. And there's another issue that's popping up here that probably hasn't made much press in Alberta recently, is the main Enbridge pipeline dips down into the US, goes across the Straits of Mackinac, and then back into Canada and down to Sarnia. The state of Michigan doesn't want the pipeline going through the Great Lakes. And as a result of that, there's a push on to build a tunnel and put the pipeline in the tunnel. The thing is, there's a huge backlash again against the tunnel. It would be very easy for the US government to simply say that it's an environmental hazard and we're closing the pipeline.
Yeah,
And
and
if they
that's
did,
outside influence controlling our energy sector that we shouldn't probably have. We should have pipelines running through Canada out east, where we
well,
control it from beginning to end.
well, Trump has definitely shown that our biggest trading partner cannot be trusted. And if they cut off the oil and gas going from Alberta through to the Sarnia plants, what that would do, obviously, is lower the price of Canadian crude again to the Americans. And so there
They
would be a
do
vested
everything to
in.
benefit themselves to get our oil for peanuts, and that's got to stop. I mean, that it's hurting oil and gas companies. I mean, local oil and gas cannot compete with Americans and foreign oil. We need to start looking at supporting local oil and gas companies. That's pathetic
There
that
was,
we're allowing all the profits from, the oil to leave the country. For every dollar that stays in the economy, we get tenfold the benefit. For every dollar that leaves the country, we get zero benefit for it. And that, we're talking billions and billions of dollars leaving Canada that do not need to leave annually.
one of the other issues is obviously that the oil and gas industry is one of the most profitable industries in Canada, yet it is the most subsidized industry in
Corporate
Canada.
welfare is totally gone out of hand, and that's the capitalist movement. They, since the 1970 Reaganomics, they have been manipulating the mindsets of people so that corporate welfare is acceptable, but the single mom living on welfare is a scourge on society.
Anyways, back to the Mackinac Tunnel.
Tunnel has been in the courts quite a few times in the U.S., has it not?
Well, the federal government obviously in the U.S. has jurisdiction over international boundaries, and therefore it's overruled the state of Michigan and said that the project is going to continue. In 2018, the estimate was $500 million for the tunnel. The tunnel is, Trump said he was going to fast track energy projects, but this remains to be seen because it doesn't benefit the US at all. And it was scheduled for approval in 2026.
So you're predicting that Trump's gonna put a kibosh to this tunnel and this plan, or do you think he's gonna allow it so he has a gun to our heads at any time he wants to shut the oil flow on international or US grounds coming back to Canada? He wants the total control?
Well, you never know. You never know what he's going to do. He wakes up one morning and somebody whispers in his ear, and it's the latest policy. The fact of the matter is, you cannot have that kind of control in that type of volatility. You can't rely on him. He negotiated the treaty between Mexico, U.S., and Canada. Then he canceled the treaty, and then complained about the person who negotiated, which was himself.
Yeah.
So you can't trust.
Billions of cost to build a tunnel. It would be a hell of a lot cheaper just to build a pipeline across through Ontario in the north and head it down south. Like, it's total economic bullshit building a tunnel if we can do it for much cheaper. And pipelines are safe. The technology these days, they've got sensors on pipelines. The impact that they're going to have if they do rupture is not significant because they got shut off valves at different points in the pipelines. The X-ray technology is state of the art. The maintenance and pigging of the lines is done regular. We have some of the best technology in the industry to maintain pipelines, and we don't have that many pipelines that go askew. There's the odd pipeline that we have cracked, of course, but with 100% X-ray of every joint, it mitigates the potential for a damage leak.
Well, let me tell you what some of the objections are. There's a complaint that the local vistas would be marred by cranes during the construction period. There's a complaint that some aquatic wildlife would be disturbed, and there's a complaint.
Well, from a wildlife point of view, there's minimal disturbance.
Let me continue here. There's a complaint that it would mean the loss of nearly 300 trees.
300 trees in Alberta?
Yeah.
Canada? Wow.
No. Well,
Canada.
it goes to show you the stretch that people are prepared to go to oppose something. But the reality is that if there was ever a spill, if that pipeline ever ruptured, if somebody dragged an anchor and hooked it, it would be devastating. It could do tremendous damage to the Great Lakes. So something needs to be done.
I mean, we can go back to a historical event. The largest land spill in North America is what's that place you showed me out there in Ontario called Oil City,
Yeah.
the largest wildcat well flowing right into the Great Lakes with oil. They named a river after it, the Black River. They showed ships all over the Great Lakes with oil on them. They estimate 700 barrels a day when they didn't even have the technology to shut in a blowout well. And who knows how many barrels of oil actually flowed into the Great Lakes. And guess what? It's agricultural land today. And I was there. There's grass is growing, crops are growing, the fish are in the river, there's still fish in the Great Lakes. It's, and it was a large, we would never be able to have a spill that big, I don't think, without having it shut in quickly. So I think people should go to Oil City and do some historical research on major oil spills and their actual effects on the environment over long term. Short term, yes, there's some definite impact. I'll agree there. But nobody in the oil industry is wanting to have an environmental catastrophe through their company or on their hands. So every oil executive is making sure that they're doing the utmost with their budgets to ensure that pipelines won't break or wells won't blow. And I think the environmentalists are hugging the wrong trees, I think.
Again, there's a lot for Carney to talk about with his oil compatriots in Calgary. But the fact of the matter is, what were the results of those conversations? Have they announced anything?
Well, these are the same people that caused the problems in Alberta that want the discounted oil and are the benefactors of billions and billions annually of corporate welfare. Why would you run to them for the solution to which they are part of? Now, talking about that, I'm the CEO of an oil company that's pushed out of business called P&G Exploration Limited. We were pushed out by land banking of oil rights in public auctions where there's no reserve auction. But because we bid low to get the oil right assets, we were prejudiced in the Saskatchewan land bid. That resulted in us getting no acceptable bids, yet we were the highest bidder, and we tried to sue the Saskatchewan government, and the lawsuit's still on the books, and we've been pushed out of business because we wouldn't be able to produce oil and get it into the benefactor's pipeline. So there's no excuse for not looking at local oil and gas companies that might have better ideas. I actually wrote on behalf of P&G Exploration, I wrote the Minister of Energy when Trudeau had stepped down, and I wrote to Trudeau directly, so they do have an application for a plan to strengthen Alberta and Canada as an energy power. That letter still is important, I think, and I wasn't invited to the meeting, which I wouldn't expect to be invited because I'm pushed out of business because of the lawsuit. But the point being is I ran for mayor of Calgary on the premise that we should be building oil refineries here in Calgary area, because as a fifth generation Albertan, the east of Calgary is one of the best areas to develop infrastructure for oil refinery and hydrogen refining in all of Alberta. We have the warmest climate because of the Chinooks. We have less environmental impact because there's no boreal forests, and to the east we have grassland and prairie where there's very few endangered species that would be affected. We're quite a ways away from water drainage areas because the Red Deer River and the Bull River, there's a whole area in between where it's relatively easy to operate from. And environmentally, it's a plus. So, Robert, you kicked out. But the important thing is that I haven't got you on there, Robert.
Don't know why.
I don't like talking to myself. But anyway, where I was going was that
maybe it ceases.
Yeah, well, as running for mayor, the problem resulted that I was silent. I wasn't allowed in any debates or do any interviews on TV. Now, as a fifth generation Albertan, I actually worked with Fish and Wildlife when I was younger in the Habitat Protection Branch, and my area was east of Calgary, and I do know that the mitigated environmental impacts would be that. Furthermore, when I was earlier than that, I'd worked on drilling rigs in the Drumheller region, and there's a lot of reef formations that have pumped the oil out, which would be great disposal wells for the byproducts of the refining industry. So we don't have to ship the cake and all that down to Texas where they're having a problem dealing with disposal of the cake. We can deal with that here. And benzene and byproducts that are dangerous to the health, we can deal with that more effectively here. So I did write all that to the Minister of Energy, and as an oil executive with an oil company, you would have thought they would pay attention and contact, but no, they haven't. And the reason is they're catering to the wealthy. The wealthy people, the billionaires, are depicting what we are going to have as a country and as a province, and we pay them subsidies and to ensure that. We don't need that. There are people like me out there. There's hundreds of people like me that can run oil companies and bring wealth to the province and keep the money here in the province and in Canada. But we're not given the opportunity because of government. So I'm at a retirement age. I don't really give a flying whatever, but I can still offer services and ideas. So why wouldn't you consult with someone like me to build a stronger Alberta energy sector and a stronger Canadian? I oppose the Americans owning everything, so I'm perfect. For that purpose, I can help Canada become strong in the energy sector. If you're relying on our foreign-owned companies to come in and strengthen Canada against the interests of their home offices in foreign countries, that's never going to happen. Never, ever. So what's your take on that, Cal? You also have an oil background and fully aware of the oil industry.
It's an international industry that drives conflicts all around the world. So
Wars,
we,
you mean,
yeah. So we could probably be happy in the sense that, our oil and gas hasn't caused too much of a conflict, except for the one you mentioned between Alberta and Quebec. Everywhere else in the world, it seems to generate hate, war. Just start looking at all the places where, that have been recently bombed or taken over, from Libya to Iraq to Iran to, you name it.
But,
There's,
but
there's,
is that
there's,
is that the reason that we're being targeted with Trump? And is it Trump said he was going to go after the oil industry and
politics at all.
yeah,
And because of that,
about a grade 10 education too.
well, because of that, they get what they deserve. They unfortunately, for whatever reason, they keep electing the same old year after year after year for the last 30 years.
I'm a minority in my own province. I mean, I'm a fifth generation Albertan, and I don't agree with a lot of the stupidity that's going on. And here we are, having to have discussions about it. A lot of people in my lifetime, there's a lot of first and second generation people that moved to the province because they didn't have the ingenuity to create businesses and jobs in their home communities. Those people, like, they left their communities because they weren't willing to strive and do entrepreneurial things to make jobs in their own communities. They ran to Alberta where, they wanted boom and bust jobs run by foreign companies to extract the profits out. Well, that contributed to a problem in Alberta significantly.
I don't know if you can blame it on them, but
weren't you from the east and came here, made your fortune, and moved back east?
Well, no, but the thing is, the thing is, at one time Alberta was growing. It wasn't, it's living memory that, Calgary was 200, 250 people. Edmonton was 200, 250 people. Now it's millions. So it's been backfilled significantly.
But we still have 8% official unemployment. But if you look around, that unemployment rate's actually closer to 15, maybe 20 unemployed.
Yeah, I don't know how they count them, but what I can say though is more isn't better. So when the politicians want to develop, more housing, more roadways, more this, more that, uh, you don't get better. You just get more of the same, and
Right.
everybody else gets less. And it's the reckless growth of Alberta that I think is uh, giving lifestyle issues. At
Well,
one time you
we're
used to.
electing people that I wouldn't hire to run a hot dog stand at a Flames game. It just, we're not putting the right people into politics because you can only get into politics if you're willing to kiss hiney of a wealthy person to pay for your election. So you owe favors at the end. We don't have a true democracy here by any means. In Alberta, it's more of a oligarchy run regime that only elects the same people in for the last half century. Money rules the roost here.
Well, and apathy. I'm
And
not sure what the
apathy,
vote.
but that's paid for by the media selective coverage. I mean, other countries in Europe have eliminated the media from advertising anything except equal time for any politician running, because they know that the media influences everything that's in an election. And we don't. We let them have free support of whatever candidates and policies they want. So the media is a third party major influencer, and they're all foreign owned in Alberta.
Did you get invited to the mayor's uh, speaking to the media when you ran for mayor?
Not a chance. They wouldn't let
Did
me anywhere
did
near them on business issues. I mean, look at the incompetency with the water pipe break. The mayor was on council for 10 years and they weren't dealing with the water mains in Calgary, but they wanted to give a 1.2 billion stadium away free and then blow up a 600 million to 800 million dollar stadium that would be able to compete with them and actually offer more concerts for Calgarians. So the light's on, but nobody's home here in Calgary. They
well, if you think about it from a practical aspect, like you have there with respect to the water is more important than Britney Spears. I don't see how more concerts for the city of Calgary even makes it to the economic base of spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a facility that I just don't
and they want to
I don't get it.
destroy a historic building that's recognized around the world from the Olympics, which is the Saddle Dome. They sold the grounds for 90 million, and then they're going to build a $350 million hotel for the rich to live right close to the stadium and the new stadium they're building. And the building itself right now as it sits is worth 600 million. So that's blow up a $600 million building that's perfectly fine and will last another 100 years, 200 years with maintenance. And, for what? They duped through the media everybody to hand a billionaire that lives in Europe the profits from the city entertainment district to leave the economy. That money's leaving the economy. It's not staying here. You're not getting the benefit of it here. So that's the stupidest business model I've ever heard of in my life. And here it's rating Calgary.
Well, it seems to me that
Right,
Calgary must
Calgary?
seems
It's
seems
all
to me
about the
that
money.
seems to me that Calgary must be doing pretty good if they can afford to blow $600 million buildings up. So
Well, the
I
taxes have gone up, what, 20% in 4 years? And people, they're having troubles paying their mortgages and they're having troubles here and there. Like the disposable income in Calgary, I mean, Calgary is broken into 4 sectors. The rich in the northwest, they're doing great. The middle income in the southwest is doing okay. Then you got the lower middle income in the southeast doing not so good. They're broke. And then you got the northeast, which is where the poor people and the broke people live, and they're really crying. The insurance rates are going through the roofs on their houses, and they're crying that they can't pay the bills. And then we got we're building a city built on US city model dynamics where all the poor people and homeless are congregated in the downtown core. Even I won't walk down there, and I'm 6'1", 230 pounds and tough as nails, and I won't walk downtown Calgary even in broad daylight. It's too dangerous. It wasn't that way 10, 15 years ago. I'd walk there anywhere.
Cory, you should check the batteries in your scale.
Oh, yeah, sure. I lost weight now. I'm fit.
Sure.
Well, that's why I'm only shooting from the top
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, the camera makes you look skinnier, right?
That's right.
Anyways,
photography special effect.
So what happened with all this with the discussions? Have they said anything?
For what?
Well, Carney speaking to the oil executive.
Well, no, it's all confidential. Like they're not letting anybody know because the oil and gas industry doesn't want any discussion on the subsidy system that they've got in place, and they're trying to figure out how much money Ottawa will pay to build pipelines east. They won't build an oil refinery complex for Alberta where we can ship more environmentally friendly refined products to major markets. If you don't like the pipelines, it's much easier to ship a tanker full of diesel or pipelines full of diesel that don't corrode the pipeline. The problem with Alberta oil is it has a lot of sand and particulate in the oil that's microscopic, and it acts like sandpaper on the pipeline. So if you eliminate that and refine the product here, it would be much safer to ship anywhere in the world. So that's why we should be building our oil refinery complexes and hydrogen extraction complexes here in Alberta. And you want to become an energy superpower, that is the only way to do it. And that cuts on the cost of upgrading, because we upgrade and do it right on the same facility. We control the environmental impact. We also take a bump in the value that we can get for our oil, because we can get the proper oil royalties and taxation regimes in place to tax the revenue off the oil. We have more than benefit. We could produce 25% of the oil that we're producing right now and make double the profits for the country and the local economy. So it's a business model that is stupid not to follow. We need to cut the BS of shipping a raw unfinished product away. There's more stability in refining here. There's more jobs. There's less boom and bust economy here. The local communities would prosper unreal. We'd be the Saudi of North America, and that is the way that we need to be approaching this. And I hope my phone rings off the hook. Carney hears this and starts paying attention. Then we can actually start having some real impact in making Canada the energy powerhouse that it should have been 50 years ago. Well, I mean, even Plater Lougheed sold off our Alberta Crown Corporation pipeline to get so that all the oil will flow to Texas, where when he retired, he became the senior partner to Bennett Jones, which has the largest law firm in Texas.
Cory, my advice is don't hold your breath waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah, well, it's up to the people. We're trying to educate people on this podcast. It's up to the people. If you like what we're talking, subscribe. Make sure you hit like, share it, because you got to inform people. I can only tell you bits and pieces. I can't get into exact details and spend 4 hours educating you, but I can tell you that it's up to the people watching this podcast to take action. And action is making sure that people hear both sides of the story, both sides of the coin. I don't know what's the proper and right way to approach it, but we have to, think outside the box to compete in the world stage. And we can't trust the U.S. anymore, absolutely. So
well, one of the cons that the Alberta governments in the past have always promised is to reduce your taxes, right? And then,
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
that's the
Ralph
big,
Fox, they came right out in the middle of an election, which is, in any other democratic society, he would have been in jail or in prison for bribing voters. But this is Alberta, the
with their
land
own
of the
money,
geniuses.
with their own money. And the thing is
Yeah,
that gets you right back to the point, what do people care about? The short-term gain.
right.
If they think for a minute that somebody's going to reduce their taxes, you know, half the people will vote for that without asking
Well,
how is
that's the
that possible.
rally cry of the conservatives, and they've never ever lowered the taxes. They've sold off crown corporations to private people. Well, those crown corporations brought profit to the government that kept your taxes lower. Once those crown corporation revenues are sold off, you get no money. Now your taxes go up. And then when you run up the bills, because conservatives always run up higher spending bills catering to their corporate welfare recipients, your taxes go up. It's the same thing in Alberta. I could show you ways that we wouldn't have to pay any taxes. And, I don't, people wouldn't go for it because that would take a little dedication and planning and getting rid of corruption. So, you're not gonna fight the wealthy without a big battle. Money talks,
Anyways,
bullshit
anyways,
talks.
you're right. If anybody finds anything interesting in any of this, push the like button. Who knows? You know,
Yeah.
maybe we'll find out what Carney and the oil
And we'll
magnates.
have another podcast on that too. So I look forward to that. I mean, we're just
I'm look.
touching we can go into this more in depth in other podcasts, but I just wanted to discuss on the surface some of the real issues that are going on in Alberta, and that we need to start listening to more opinions and not allowing the wealthy to influence the politics, and the wealthy are foreigners mostly. So I think they did a commission on that. What were the commission results on that foreign influence in Canada? I didn't hear them once say that the foreign media was the influence and foreign oil companies had major influence in the West and propagandizing and gaslighting Canada for profit. You hear that out east? I don't know what they're saying out in Ontario.
Well, in the recent past, the big one has been blaming China for influencing elections, and I guess it helps to have a boogeyman, but
Well,
I'm not
China's
sure how.
nothing compared to the U.S. oil tycoons' influence in Canada.
Well, and it just goes to show you, you have to have, the shiny object, where you go, look at the shiny object, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, who ran the cost of the Trans Mountain Pipeline to the coastal waters through BC? Well, it was all the U.S. influencers did that. They quadrupled the cost of a pipeline. Had Trudeau not put that pipeline in, they would have absolute control under Trump as to what's going on with our oil industry. It's a good thing they put that pipeline through, because it negated the power Trump has over Alberta and Canada, because we can get at least some oil to coastal waters. So thank you, Trudeau. I do have to admit, you did a great job putting that Trans Mountain Pipeline through when, the morons in Alberta didn't want it, because that would increase the amount of money Alberta would get to lower your taxes. Pierre Elliott Trudeau did the same thing. The minute Peter Lougheed sold the pipeline in 1979, it was 1980, fall of 1980, that Pierre Elliott Trudeau stepped in and said, hey, quit screwing over Albertans, quit screwing over Canada. We're going to set up a national energy program where we want at least 50% of the oil industry and resource industry to be Canadian owned. We don't have that today. We're all foreign owned. But thank you, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Thank you, Justin Trudeau. Us few Albertans that know what's really going on do appreciate that you tried to step in. And we don't appreciate that the Americans paint you as the scourge of Alberta and you know, you're not doing, you've actually done more for Alberta than 50 years of conservative governments did for Albertans in Alberta. So thank you.
And on that note,
Okay, on that note, catch you later.
thanks, bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.